So the EPA issued this 6-page document in July of 2022, which revises the EPA's testing policy for battery electric vehicles, starting with 2024 models. And so now we're seeing that Tesla has revised the range numbers for some of their models. So let's go through the changes and then explain how the new policy works. So if you check out the Model S, the long range stayed at 405 miles. The 21-inch wheels actually went up.
The Plaid dropped. The Model X long range dropped. The Plaid Model X dropped.
The Model Y rear-wheel drive stayed the same, but the long range dropped.
And so did the performance.
And the Model 3 was unchanged.
Okay, I'm confused. I mean, why did some models go up in range and others drop in range if Tesla hasn't actually changed the cars at all? And why didn't Tesla update the Model 3 range numbers?
All right, well, let's answer your last question first because it's the easiest. So the EPA states, vehicles utilizing carryover data may continue to use data generated under previous policy for as long as the tests are valid. So no changes to the vehicle requiring new MPGe range testing are required. Manufacturers who add a new configuration to a test group for 2024 and later must present new test results using this policy.
Okay, so because Tesla hasn't officially launched the new Highland Model 3 refresh yet in North America, it can use the 2023 EPA data for the Model 3, but not for the Model Y and all these other ones.
Correct. Now to your first question, why are range numbers going up and down? The EPA has now realized that there are different drive modes on a lot of EVs. It only took them, 10 years.
Okay.
So if an EV has more than one drive mode, they said, quote, determine the best case and worst case latching modes for range and MPGe, test in both modes, and average the results. So they basically make the manufacturer test the vehicle in the most efficient drive mode and test it again in the least efficient drive mode, and then average the two numbers.
Okay, so hang on. Teslas have chill mode, which is, well, chill. It reduces acceleration and generally improves range because you're not like, you're like,
Right.
And that makes it more efficient. Okay, but Teslas also have insane and some have ludicrous modes, which are just fun for like blast offs, but they're very inefficient because you're putting just so much energy into acceleration, which isn't that efficient.
Right, and I think therein lies the problem. Realistically, you're probably not going to drive long distances to grandpa's house in insane mode, but the EPA is making Tesla average that mode into their range calculations.
So up until now, I've been pretty positive about the EPA range testing method. It's actually the most realistic of all the methods. It averages half highway driving with half city driving, but I don't think that the EPA's new range testing method is actually going to help consumers.
I agree. The average between two drive modes, especially a drive mode designed for racing, isn't going to give a realistic number, especially for Teslas. And it's going to actually help other manufacturers who don't typically put insane type drive modes in their cars. And I think that's why the EPA did this. The EPA is another federal agency that has been targeting Elon. This new guidance came out from the EPA in July of 2022, less than 3 months before President Biden said this publicly.
Mr. President, do you think Elon Musk is a threat to U.S. national security? And should the U.S., and with the tools you have, investigate his joint acquisition of Twitter with foreign governments, which include the Saudis?
I think that Elon Musk's cooperation and/or technical relationships with other countries is worthy of being looked at. Whether or not he is doing anything inappropriate, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that it's worth being looked at. But that's all I'll say. There's a lot of ways.
Now, I've thought long and hard about this one. Why would the EPA put out this new policy? It doesn't help consumers get more accurate range estimates on EVs that they're considering buying. It doesn't take into account temperature or speed, which are two of the biggest factors. And it largely only affects Tesla because it takes Elon's fun modes like insane and ludicrous and uses them against their range estimate. EPA, if you want to get at more accurate range numbers, then factor in temperature by testing all new EVs in cold conditions and informing customers about how that affects each model. Test each model at highway speeds and city speeds like you do on the Monroney sticker for ICE cars' MPG ratings.
Now, I do want to just take a step back here because a lot of different EVs will have an eco mode, which is very, very, very Spartan. It's very slow and not very good, and most people aren't going to use it. They're going to use the normal mode. And so I think that was kind of a way that a lot of manufacturers could kind of get around the EPA range testing, was that they were going to have this eco mode that they knew that no one was going to use, and then you were going to use the normal mode. Like, for instance, the Rivian has an eco mode where only the two front motors are turned on, which totally limits your acceleration a lot and your traction and everything else. And most of the time you're going to be in just the normal mode where all four motors go and you have tons of acceleration.
Okay, so EPA, just tell us each of the modes and what range you get in each of the modes. Give the consumer more information. I mean, on the Monroney sticker, you get to see an ICE car, what it gets in city driving, what it gets in highway driving. They do average it for you, but you can just see that yourself. Why not do that for EVs?
Because as soon as you average the data, you're destroying information.
Exactly.
Right? Like, we don't know what the top end is. We don't know what the low end is. Right. It might be very useful for me to see, like, okay, in ludicrous mode, the Model S is only going to get, 150 miles of range, let's say. But in eco mode, it could get the 450 miles.
And one of the biggest questions people have is, how much range will I lose in cold weather? So EPA, test it for us and tell us.
Yeah.
Look, maybe I'm being too tinfoil hat here. Maybe the EPA is just a bunch of bureaucrats that wanted to fix something that wasn't broken. Let me know what you think in the comments. To back up my argument, go to the grocery store, pick up pretty much anything in the grocery store. There's going to be a little label on there with tons of little numbers, and if you want to look at them, you can. It'll tell you the protein, the carbohydrates, the fat, and so forth. So we know as consumers how to look at things like that.
And they'll even print stuff that you can't even pronounce in the ingredients list, just so that way you know what's in it. So if it's monoglutamate,
do the same thing with the battery. Yeah. Tell us where the battery materials come from and what's in my battery.
Sure.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for watching Now You Know Clips.
You can watch full episodes of Tesla Time News on Tuesdays and in-depths on Fridays. Just click the link down below and head over to the Now You Know channel.